Someone is targeting the most vulnerable people in the city. The number of deaths is rising, and each murder escalates in violence.
We've got a lot of vulnerable people in Winnipeg. How are we going to protect them from this happening?
If this killer isn't found, there's no telling how many more could die.
I'm pretty worried now that this is not going to stop. So it's escalating all the time. We've got a huge problem on our hands here. The unsolved ones, we have to stand up
and approach these cases in a way outside the box.
Let the world know, is those out there that did commit a murder, there are people that are coming after you.
There's just a lot of good people trying to do the right thing.
Because it's something that you have to be passionate about.
Solve this, bring some peace to the family at least. Just doing my job.
In the early morning of April 10th, 2015, in Winnipeg, Manitoba, a transit employee finds a man seemingly asleep in a bus shelter. On closer inspection, the man is horribly injured. The transit worker immediately calls for an ambulance and the police.
Police showed up and they found lots of bruising on his head, lots of blood on the floor. And what was unusual was his pants had been taken off. At this time, they didn't know whether he had taken his pants off himself or whether somebody else had removed it. It was just unusual.
The unknown man is rushed to the hospital as police begin investigating the brutal attack. Until the assailant is found, the city's most vulnerable citizens could be in trouble. Winnipeg is one of the largest cities in Canada.
It is a beautiful city, and it's a wonderful city. It's been so good to me and my family. And you know what? It's a big city, and every big city has a rough edge to it. Winnipeg is historically a type of frontier town, and that's where it started off as a trading post, and it just progressed from that. And a frontier town came with all the other issues that comes with frontier towns where people could just keep on moving. I moved there. I'm originally from Ireland.
Unfortunately, this kind of brutal attack is not as rare in the city of Winnipeg as we wished it was. Winnipeg has often found itself rated fairly high on the crime severity index and the number of homicides per capita.
It's got a gang problem. It's got a poverty problem. It's not a police issue to try and solve all these things. There's so many layers of government have got to get in there and provide the proper education and the proper direction to the youth, especially. It was an extremely busy year for homicides as well. Our unit was quite a bit smaller than it is now. We had 14 investigators and 2 supervisors working in the unit, and it was busy all the time. We were supposed to work Monday to Fridays, but we worked around the clock regularly. It was not unusual to work a 15, 20, 30-hour day without a break.
The man in the bus shelter is identified as Miles Monius.
We were able to identify him through fingerprints. Miles's family were extremely cooperative as much as they could. It didn't sound like Miles had any enemies, any beefs with anybody in the community. He seemed to be a decent, happy, easygoing person. When Miles Monius was attacked, it was the day that the Jets made the playoffs for the very first time. So Portage and Main was absolutely packed. There was thousands of people out there celebrating. They even shut down the intersection. They were playing street hockey there. It was a good time. Good time was had by all. Everybody was happy.
On the morning when Miles Monius is found, there are 4 other people with him in the bus shelter.
At that time, Winnipeg Transit would come around, check on the bus shacks, and they found these 5 people in the bus shelter. and they asked him to move. So the 4 people that were still alive got up and moved. They took their blankets and whatever else that they had with them, and they just headed off south on Main Street and eventually into Winnipeg Square, into the underground, and disappeared into the morning. But the transit people tried to rouse the man that was still, they thought, sleeping. They found him unresponsive. They found blood around his head, and they realized that this person was most likely the victim of an assault. At this time, Miles was still alive. He was transported to the hospital in critical condition, and he was put under observation. He was treated, moved to the intensive care unit. I believe he had suffered massive head injuries from the attack. He had previous head injury before that, so he was, not only was he vulnerable because of his circumstances, his health was vulnerable.
The victim is determined to have a substantial list of injuries, including bruising and swelling to the face and scalp, a large bilateral craniectomy, massive brain swelling and herniation, all of which point to repeated and severe blunt trauma to the head.
One of the strange things about Miles Manias, and this is upsetting, but he had footprints on his face from where he was literally stomped. And there was 2 different footprints on his face, which from 2 different types of shoes. Now, that would lead you to believe that there's 2 attackers, but it could also be the fact that somebody had odd shoes. The bus shack was frequented by 4 people who had left. We didn't know who they were. There was very little left behind. It was just whatever debris was in the bus shack for overnight. There was a couple of cigarette butts. Could they have been there from earlier in the day? Of course they could, but they're just things that you pick up. There's a million fingerprints on the glass of this bus shelter. You take as many as you can and you try and identify them. And you basically work with what you got. The scene, there's very little left behind. The body has been attacked.
When investigating a crime that occurred in a public place, there can be a real situation where there's just too much information, too much evidence. You think about how many people walk through a bus shelter every single day. So a broken bottle you might find in a private residence will give you a wealth of information about a crime that happened that's very specific. A broken bottle in a bus shelter or in a public place could have been there for days, weeks even. And it just adds to the complexity of the forensic analysis that needs to be done on all of these pieces of evidence.
The Winnipeg Police Service Major Crimes Unit started the investigation, and they gathered as much intelligence and information as they could. There are no witnesses, even though there's thousands of people on the street earlier in the evening. We didn't know exactly what time Miles had been attacked. We went out and gathered as much CCTV video as possible. You do see some shadows coming and going. Unfortunately, it's all from a distance. Nothing that's going to tell you who it is.
The closed-circuit television footage is taken from a building that is close by, but not actually meant for surveilling the bus shack. Because of this, while the footage shows the area, the actual crime is barely visible. Still, there is some information to be gleaned.
We do see the 4 people coming into the shack at different times during the night. They don't all come together, but they all leave together. So there are 4 persons of interest.
The investigation is making headway, but terrible news makes its way back to the Winnipeg police. Miles Manias is unable to survive the horrible injuries he has sustained and dies in hospital. This is no longer about an assault. This is now a murder investigation. And a killer is on the streets. On an early spring morning in Winnipeg, Manitoba, a man is found brutally beaten in a bus shelter. The man is brought to the hospital and is identified soon after as Miles Monius. The Winnipeg police begin investigating the assault, but the bus shack where it occurred has too much traffic to determine what might actually mean anything to the case. Thankfully, a nearby building has a CCTV camera that sees the bus shack. Though the footage isn't clear enough to determine who is responsible, it does reveal 4 people who came into the bus shack throughout the night. Doctors do their best, but Miles eventually succumbs to his injuries and passes away. The investigation is no longer about an assault, but about finding a murderer.
By the time Miles had passed away, we were able to gather more of that CCTV video from different areas on Main Street, inside Winnipeg Square. Now we have a better view of these 4 people. We're going under the point that these probably are involved in Miles's death. I mean, they're the last people who were with him. Our next thing is to try and identify these people, and it's very, very difficult. You've got 4 blur faces from CCTV in April where people are wearing heavy coats, they're wearing hats, they're wearing scarves and toques. So, everybody's covered up. It's Winnipeg. We eventually, after 3 or 4 days, we now have an idea who these people are.
The 4 suspects are found and brought into the police station for questioning.
When we do find these people, they know absolutely nothing about what's happening, and our investigators, they don't know that.
Nearly every suspect starts by saying, no, it wasn't me, denying that they committed this crime. So then it's up to you to make a decision based on what you've got in front of you, based on your gut feelings, based on the evidence, and what it's telling you is, do you need to push forward, or do you believe what they're saying?
And it's hard to know if they're holding back, if they're lying, or if they're being completely truthful. And it was hours and hours and hours of interview of each of these people before we got nowhere. We were literally spinning our wheels, focusing on these 4 individuals and trying to find out if they weren't involved, they must know who was involved. They must know what happened. But then again, there was the unknown factor that we know when these people came into the bus shack, there was thousands of people out on the street. Could it have been one of the revelers from the hockey game? It could very easily have been. It's getting colder by the day. We front-loaded it. We've put as much into it as we could at the very beginning. We've tracked down these 4 people. We've interviewed them. We've interviewed their friends. We've interviewed their associates to see if they've made any disclosure about anything. This is an extremely difficult case.
But before a breakthrough can come, another murder investigation begins. At 1:45 in the morning, Donald Cullen's body is found behind a parking lot that's under construction, behind a hotel.
And the parking lot was almost completed. The construction of this multi-story car park was underway, and it was almost completed and ready to be opened. So I get called at home at 1:20 in the morning. This is on a Saturday morning. I make my way up to this crime scene. It's a violent scene. It's disturbing. No matter how many times you've seen it, it's disturbing.
The attack appears to be even more brutal than what happened to Miles Monius.
The second victim's injuries include a scalp hemorrhage and multi-contusions to the side of the head, nasal fractures, multifocal lacerations, and hemorrhage to the neck muscles and a stab wound to the neck. They are once again injuries consistent with blunt trauma to the head, but this time strangulation and stabbing are added to that.
The body had been found by a pizza delivery guy who was taking a shortcut through the car park to get to, I think, to the hotel. And he had alerted a security guard at the construction site that he had found the body, and the security guard had called police. These people, even though they're the first people to find the body, they had nothing to do with it and didn't know anything. He's got an address on Carlton Street. Donald Collins isn't homeless, but he is a very vulnerable person. We find out that he's a ward of the public trustee, which means that he does have extremely vulnerable issues where they have taken over his day-to-day care. There were drag marks on the ground, and there was a belt wrapped around Mr. Collins's neck. He had been beaten badly, and like I say, his clothes had been stripped from him as well.
The police interview the security guard who called in, but there is very little further investigation to go on.
It's around 6 in the morning now, and I'm starting to think, okay, this guy has been stripped. The guy a week earlier had been stripped, Miles Manias, so maybe, and they're both killed in a similar fashion. The belt was different, so, that's a bit of a wild card right now. We have started to collect some video. We went back to Mr. Collins' apartment, and there was video inside and outside, and we know that he left his residence at 20 past 10 at night, the night before. Basically, he walked around the area, picked up a few cigarette butts, and he's just walking through that downtown area. The next time that we see him on video in front of the liquor store on Ellis and Hargrave, and he's picked up on their outside surveillance video as well at 25 past 10. We then see him walking across the road, and there's a shadow with him. I say a shadow, there's somebody that's all in black, unrecognizable. It's almost out of video, and we don't know that he's there.
Progress is made on the Donald Collins case throughout the day. But by the evening, it is forced to be put on hold when another body is found.
We're still on the 25th. It's 10 after 7 actually, and we get notified that another body has been found very, very close to Donald Collins' body, behind 339 Portage Avenue. The third victim was identified as Stoney Bushy. Mr. Bushy was another homeless person. His body was concealed in a construction site behind 339 Portage. It was covered with pallets and with plywood, and he had been beaten up pretty bad as well and stomped. The saving grace of this one was that there was a lot of surveillance video in the area. There was video from the Air Canada building, there was video from the APTN building, all in the back area. So we were able to tell exactly when this attack occurred. And it actually turned out that Stoney Bushy was killed before Donald Collins.
The third victim's list of injuries includes severe linear lacerations to the side of the head and multiple fractures to the left side of the head. There are subdural and subarachnoid hemorrhages, a partial fracture of the 7th cervical vertebrae, and patterned stains consistent with possible footprints. Once again, these injuries are consistent with the first victim, but built upon.
Another element that all three murders appear to have in common is that the victims' pants have all been removed.
At this point, I firmly believe that the three of them are related, but I also now see that there's a huge escalation between the three of them in the violence that's there. Miles Manias was beaten, kicked, and stomped. Stoney Bushy was beaten, stomped on, and beaten with a 2x4. And then his body was concealed. And then Donald Collins was beaten. He had a belt wrapped around his neck, and he was cut from his neck to his waist. So it's escalating all the time.
With 3 murder victims discovered in less than 2 weeks, the city's most vulnerable population could be in terrible trouble.
I'm pretty worried now that this is not going to stop, and they're more and more frequent. There's only hours between them now instead of days. And we got a huge problem on our hands here.
Miles Monias is found barely hanging on to life after being severely beaten in a bus shelter. Sadly, while the investigation into the assault is just beginning, Miles dies in the hospital. With CCTV footage revealing 4 possible suspects, the case starts strong. But after each lead runs its course, it looks more and more likely that Miles's murder might never be solved, at least anytime soon. 2 more murder victims are discovered, and the similarities to each other and how Miles is found makes it possible that all 3 attacks could have been committed by the same individual.
One of the things we're trying to do is we're trying to see, is there any relationship between these 3 victims? And there doesn't appear to be. So we're looking now at random killings of vulnerable people. It's very disturbing. We've got a lot of vulnerable people in Winnipeg. And we've got to, how are we going to protect them from this happening?
As with the first 2 murders, the police search for more CCTV footage that may shed any light on Stony Bushy's attack.
We got very, very lucky with the CCTV because of the areas where it happened, especially the last 2 homicides, Collins and Bushy. They're unfortunately high crime areas, and a lot of businesses have CCTV for their own security. The business community in that area were phenomenal. It was a weekend, and they brought in people, and they downloaded as much video. We told them what we believed we were investigating. We told them we believe we're investigating a serial killer who is out there picking on the most vulnerable people in our society, our homeless people. And they dropped everything and came in. That was fantastic. We couldn't have asked for more.
Sifting through the CCTV footage eventually pays off.
We find video on Ellis Avenue, a couple of shots of Stony Bushy walking with an individual. The video is terrible. The quality is brutal. It's a video of a man dressed in black. He's carrying a colored backpack, and he's with Stony Bushy. We have black and white shots that are taken at night. The lighting is terrible. You're looking at street lights and relatively cheaper security systems. And they're all in place to protect the buildings they're on. They're not there to spy on people. It's just people walk into these shots. One of the better pictures that we have is from the liquor store at Hargrave and Ellis. And we do see Stony Bushy and this individual having a very quick conversation with a security guard who's stationed outside the liquor store, and then walking south towards the Air Canada building and towards where Stony Bushy was killed.
The police plan to interview the security guard in hopes that they can help identify their suspect. But when they arrive, they receive a setback.
We find out that the security guard, that was his last day at work. He's on a Greyhound bus and he's heading to Fort McMurray to start a new job. Okay, now what do we do, you know?
The police are doing all they can to find their suspect. Every moment wasted could mean another death.
The first thing we do is we put together an internal wanted poster and send it out to every single member of the Winnipeg Police Service. This is something that they get in their email. Those that are working, they can look at it. If they come across somebody that looks like this individual, they can detain him and get him to us. If it's somebody else who's off and they happen to open their email and they recognize this person, they will call. We got nothing from that.
But getting the word out internally isn't enough, and the police decide it would be best to hold a press conference. All the police can do is wait, hoping someone calls in with information that can be helpful. But every second waiting is another second where the killer is still on the streets.
So we had the news conference, and it was within an hour we had name. of who this person was. We got calls from people in the city who were involved in social services, who were involved with shelters. Nationwide paid off as well, because we got a phone call from Fort Hope, Ontario, which is several hundred kilometers, about 400 or 500 kilometers north of Thunder Bay, in a very remote community. And this man said that he recognized the individual as his brother, John Ostamas. When I put out that bulletin to the media of this blurred picture, that looked like, it barely looked anything to me. And I thought, okay, if we get a hit on this, it's like we've won the lottery. And we got 4 or 5 phone calls, and they were all of the same person. I could not believe that. If that didn't happen, if we didn't get that grainy, dull picture on Ellis Avenue of him walking, we would have had nothing. I have enough to arrest him. I don't have enough to charge him. Nowhere close. I also have to find this guy. My best way of identifying him is this security guard who's on a bus on his way to Fort McMurray. So I look into my incident room and I call 2 of my detectives and I say, okay, you guys pack a bag, you're flying to Fort McMurray. And they said, well, really? And I said, yeah, you got to go meet this bus and interview this guy and show him a photo lineup of John Ostamas. Now that we have an identification on him. Normally there's a bunch of hoops that we should go through to get this. There was no time for that. I opened my drawer, pulled out my credit card, and I gave him the credit card, said, book the flight, we'll beg for forgiveness next week. They identified him with the photograph that we got from Thunder Bay. We go through our database and we select 9 other photographs which are similar in appearance. And we showed them an array of 10 photographs. And right away, this security guard picked up this photograph of John Ostamas. When I sent the guys out there, as they were leaving the office, I kind of jokingly said to them, if you don't get an ID, don't come back. So they phoned me and they said, guess what, we got an ID. 100% positive ID. So I said, okay, well, you're welcome to come back.
With a positive ID on John Ostamas, the next step is to find him before he finds another victim. When 3 murders happen within 2 weeks, the Winnipeg police become worried for their most vulnerable population. Though there is a clear escalation in violence with each attack, the investigation believes that the same person may be responsible for all 3. CCTV footage is proven to be invaluable and gives the police an image of a suspect that they bring to the public. Within hours of holding a press conference, they have a name, John Ostamas. But knowing who he is isn't enough. They need to immediately get him off the street.
Now we got to find him, and but it's a different kind of pressure now. It's okay. Now we're not looking for a needle in a haystack. We're looking for an individual in a city of 1 million people. But we've done that before, and we've done it very successfully.
A face and name to help their investigation leads to more information on Ostamas's actions outside of the murders.
Now we had a trail to follow. We're knocking on doors. We're finding out different things. We find out that on the Friday before the murder of Stony Bushy, John Ostamas goes to the Winnipeg Hotel on Main Street. He lights a fire upstairs in a corridor, and the hotel has to be evacuated. It's brought under control very quickly. But this is a residential hotel where a lot of vulnerable people live. The whole place had to be evacuated. Again, he's caught on video doing this.
One of the places that the police look into is the Employment and Income Assistance Office.
We're now into Monday. The city is coming alive again. It's starting to wake up. Businesses are opening. We go to the Social Assistance Office on Rory Street. The investigators ask if he's known to them. They don't know who he is, but they flag his name in case he does come in. That afternoon, we get a phone call from EIA saying that he's in their office right now on Rory Street. This is like red alert. I scramble as many crews as I can. I send 3 teams over to Rory Street. It's a short distance from Public Safety Building to Rory, but they're going at 1,000,000 miles per hour, like lights and sirens. And when they get there, sure enough, John Ostamas is there, and they arrest him. He's calm. He's easy to deal with. He's told at the time that he's under arrest for murder or a similar offense. He shrugs it off, and he's handcuffed, and he's brought into the Public Safety Building. I view him as he comes in as the supervisor. I ask him a few questions to make sure that he doesn't need any medical attention, that he understands why he's there, and he's fine. He's polite. He's understanding everything I say to him. Ask him, does he want anything? He says he's hungry, so we provide him with some food. He wants coffee. Kept asking for coffee. He had a few cigarettes. He ate several sandwiches. After it was explained to him, his legal rights were provided to him, and his right to a lawyer, and his police caution that anything he said would be recorded and used against him, and that he was being arrested for 3 homicides. He said he wanted to speak with a lawyer.
Ostamas requests a lawyer from Thunder Bay. But when that lawyer is called, he recommends someone local. The lawyer comes to talk to Ostamas, but soon leaves after, giving his client the advice to not speak to the police.
A lawyer is always going to tell their client not to talk, and it's always in their client's best interest not to make a statement. But in the end, this is a recommendation and not the law. If the client chooses to talk anyway, there's nothing to be done about it.
After a while, the investigators got some background information from John Ostamas. He started off with a bizarre story of an injury that occurred to him when he was in his very early teens. A couple of RCMP officers beat him up in Fort Hope, and he was badly injured, and he had PTSD after that and everything. And that didn't sit right with me. That just sounded wrong, because the RCMP haven't policed in Ontario for probably close to 100 years. It's the OPP. John knows the difference between the OPP and the RCMP.
The RCMP is the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. It's a national police service for the country of Canada. The RCMP provides contract policing services to all provinces and territories in the country, with the exception of Ontario and Quebec.
Ostamas' story about the RCMP loses even more credibility when the Winnipeg police speak to his brother and learn the event never occurred.
He started to talk about he wanted to get to this office chest. And he said, I've actually killed a lot of people. This is where he said, I've killed a lot of people, not just here. He said, I've killed the 3 people here. Now, a confirmation for me that he's killed the 3 people, including Miles Manias. But he said he's killed people in New York as well, and in other places. Now I'm thinking, okay, this is rambling of a guy who's trying to build an insanity case or something. In the meantime, other investigators are now searching social media. And sure enough, there's photographs on John Ostamas' Facebook account, and here he is in New York with photographs of selfies taken of him in different places in New York over different years. So maybe it's true, maybe it isn't.
Ostamas soon starts giving more details into the recent murders.
He talks about the Miles Manias homicide, how he just went into the bus shack and killed him. He never really gave a reason for killing Miles Manias. He described how he killed him, and it was brutal, absolutely brutal. He said Miles Manias was sleeping when he attacked him. And he talked about stomping on his head and trying to snap his neck, and just a brutal physical assault. He said that he went to the river and changed his clothing after that assault. And he said he always wore 2 or 3 layers of clothing, and he threw the top layer of clothing into the river, and then he just continued on his business. Then he went on to talk about the Stony Bushy homicide, and confirming that this was the second one. He said that he met Stony Bushy on the street randomly near the Quest Hotel. He said that Stony Bushy asked him, was he the devil? And he said, yes. And he said, follow me. And he said Stony Bushy just followed him down to where he killed him. He described in detail the attack on Stony Bushy, which we were able to confirm because we had a lot of it recorded on CCTV. Even though it was from a distance, it was brutal. He didn't blink an eye. He didn't show any emotion when he spoke about this. He literally just talked about, it was so matter of fact. He said after the Stony Bushy homicide, he went to the river and changed his clothes. Then he came back and he found Donald Collins in the same manner. And he said Donald Collins asked him, was he the devil as well? And he said, yes, I am, and follow me. Did this happen? Who knows? I doubt it very much. But this is what he was giving us. He led Donald Collins into the corner of this new unoccupied parking lot, and he literally slaughtered him as well. And he had the detail, which was all holdback evidence of the belt around the neck and the cutting. This was something that wasn't known, the stripping of the bodies. It's something that we were able that we knew that, okay, only the person who was there and did this can have these details.
Ostamas claims there is a reason for these attacks, that 3 men raped his girlfriend, and he was out for revenge.
We had spoken to the girl, and we actually went out and double-checked on that. Was he provoked into doing this? First of all, our 3 victims never had any contact with this woman ever. She wasn't even like a girlfriend. She was more like an ex and an acquaintance. And again, this was, I think, John's mind reaching for trying to maybe normalize it for himself even, you know, that he had felt compelled to go and do this.
But one thing gnaws at the police. Ostamas speaks of other murders he committed. It could be possible that there are more bodies to be found.
Eventually get him to open up about that, and he talks about 2 other murders in Winnipeg going back to the early 2000s. One of them we found, and it wasn't a homicide. It was an extremely severe beating of a homeless individual. The man didn't die, and he survived that beating. However, he died several years after that from an unrelated incident, or from natural causes, actually. The other one John spoke about was, he said it occurred behind the Woodbine Hotel on Main Street. And he said that he had killed another individual several months after the 4th Street one. We never found that. There were similarities to an unsolved homicide in 2007, but it happened near the Northern Hotel. And I'm always wondering, were they related? And we never could bring them close enough together. But we never found the attack that he spoke about.
Ostamas talks about more murders outside of the country, but Winnipeg police have no way to confirm. Ostamas has killed at least 3 people, and the violence has escalated severely. He claims to be responsible for many more. One thing police know for sure, this man needs to be taken off the streets. John Ostamas is believed to have murdered 3 people in less than 2 weeks in Winnipeg, Manitoba. Miles Monius, Stony Bushy, and Donald Collins are all found having been severely beaten, each murder more violent than the last. The original charges made against John Ostamas are for 2 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of second-degree murder. His lawyer makes a motion to change them all to second-degree murder, with the provision that Ostamas will plead guilty if this motion is passed.
Monius's murder is most likely classified differently from the other 2, because of how much it appears like it could have been a spontaneous decision. Monius was attacked where he was found asleep. The other 2 appear more premeditated, as they were both brought to a secondary location before they were attacked.
There are theories of sexual assault because of the clothing that is removed from the victims, but Ostamas denies it all.
Part of his agreement with his guilty plea was that he would plead guilty to 3 counts of second degree and take the 3 consecutive life sentences.
As soon as there's some sort of sexual aspect to the murder, it becomes a first-degree murder. First-degree murders require intent and premeditation, whereas second-degree murders requires intent, but you don't necessarily need that premeditated design to the crime.
The possibility of sexual assault remains inconclusive, with the investigation dropped after Ostamas' guilty plea. John Ostamas pleads guilty to all 3 counts of second-degree murder and is sentenced to 3 consecutive life sentences.
All in all, he confessed to what he believed were 17 homicides. He was convicted of 3 homicides. At the time, he got the longest sentence ever in Canada. No chance of parole for 75 years. I remember him saying in his interview that he was a killing machine. He liked killing and he was good at it. That's a very, very dangerous person. And to see him in the person, he certainly does not portray that danger. He's somebody you would walk past on the street and never, ever think that he was this person. It was an intense few days, absolutely crazy, intense few days. And I think if we hadn't got him, he would have absolutely wreaked havoc in our city and gone on somewhere else and done the same thing again. Because there's no doubt about it, his violence was escalating. These people were so vulnerable in the city of Winnipeg. They're invisible people all the time. Like, we go about our daily business, and these are invisible people. You know, they've got addictions problems, they've got solvent abuse problems, they've got mental health issues, and they do what they have to do to survive.
John Ostamas is sentenced to 3 consecutive life sentences to be served in Canadian prison. While originally ineligible for parole for 75 years, an appeal has him able to apply in 2040, when he will be 63 years old. Targeting the city's most vulnerable, Ostamas almost got away with the murder of 3 men. Thankfully, he was stopped before he could take any more victims.
Somebody has to advocate for them, and there's lots of people do. But when something like this happens to them, as society, we have to stand up and advocate for them and look out for them and remember them, because they were people.